What does that look like, making peace with death?
It's a totally different situation actually having that gun put to your head and hearing it cocked and it pressed up against your temple. And I felt and heard my sternum separate from his punch and just all the damage that had been done. And through the course of that interrogation, again, they were really trying to push that I was CIA.
You were being electrocuted.
I was being electrocuted, yeah. I mean, my whole body locked up. It was enough that when I got back home, the hairline fractures that it caused just from the way I tensed up, it fractured my entire jaw.
Hi there, I'm Natasha Zouves. This is truly one of the most extraordinary conversations I've ever had. U.S. Army veteran Alex Drueke survived 105 days in the hands of the Russians, being tortured, his ribs broken, his sternum separated, being electrocuted. This is how he survived, through solitary confinement, speaking with the ants. And he says all the while refusing to fall to his knees or to cry out. He says he didn't want the Russians to win. Here's our conversation.
Alex Drueke, it's so good to see you again.
You as well, Natasha.
I want to go back in your story because I understand that you retired from the U.S. Army after 12 years. There were 2 tours, if I'm correct, in Iraq. What prompted you to go and help in Ukraine?
Once I saw the invasion happen and all the Ukrainians having to flee their homes and everything, I felt compelled to go over and help in whatever way I could. This was a clear case of Russian aggression, of good versus evil, of, a tyrant and a dictator trying to break a country's sovereignty. And it's because of those 12 years in the Army and the 2 tours in Iraq that I really felt I had something to offer. I was a platoon sergeant in the Army, so I was very experienced with training soldiers and teaching them how to use NATO weapons and use NATO doctrine, which I realized Ukraine was about to receive. So I went over primarily with the goal of being a trainer and just, teaching them those weapons and those tactics. And then of course I ended up fighting, but that's part of the later story. Yeah.
Yeah. And you understood that fighting might be part of it.
Of course. Yeah, I definitely did.
I know a mission went terribly wrong about 2 months in, and you managed to evade capture along with another American for about 8 hours. I know you can't share all of the details about that experience, but what happened there?
Let me tell you that the fog of war is a real thing, and things just went south very quick. So yeah, my buddy Andy and I, we ended up kind of being on our own. I'll put it that way. And we realized what was going on. We had no vehicles, we had no radios, we had no maps. It was our first day. We didn't really know where we were, how to get back to base. We had driven for over an hour, and we were about to attempt to walk back on foot. So yeah, and in the course of that, it was about 10 hours overall. That we spent evading the enemy, watching out for drones, tripwires, regularly artillery and mortar fire was coming in. We'd have to backtrack because of that. We had to backtrack because of a swamp. It was not a fun day. And Ukraine gets surprisingly hot in the summer. And this was June 9th was our capture day.
It must have been a desperate situation. I mean, what was already going through your mind at that point? And to be clear, you say first day, but this was not your first day fighting. This was just your first day with that specific unit. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. There were a lot of things going through my mind. We, at one point it was Andy and I with an RPG facing a T-72 tank. And, when we managed to run away from the tank, and we found a hole to get in and hide. And Andy turned to me and he said, "I've decided I want to live." And so from that moment on, as a platoon sergeant, and I'm 12 years older than him, I said, it's my responsibility to take care of this kid, this guy. He wants to live. And so my only mission in life right now is to keep Andy alive, whatever that entails. So when we ended up being caught in a pincher movement by the Russian forces, I was ready to just go out in a blaze of glory and take as many of them with me as I could. But I looked over and I saw Andy and I said, I can't, if I do that, Andy dies. So that's the only reason that I laid down my arms. And
wow.
Really that was my main focus for that entire time. It was, let's get home and let's keep Andy alive.
And I understand at that point, bags were put over your head. I mean, did you think that you would just be executed right there and then?
Oh yeah. I mean, they stripped of us all our gear. They looted our gear, which is a war crime. They wrapped cloth around our heads and then tape around that cloth, bound our hands, put us down on our knees. I had a Makarov pistol put to my head and the guy was screaming, "How many Russians have you killed?" So yeah, I mean, I was 100% sure I was going to die right then and there on a dirt road in this tiny little village north of Kharkiv, Ukraine. I was prepared for that.
You end up being taken to a black site instead. And what unfolds?
Yeah, we spent about 24 hours in the little outpost the soldiers had there. There were more war crimes. They made us dig a fighting position. They came back out wearing all of our gear. These are all war crimes. They're minor war crimes, but they're there. The privates, the younger soldiers, it just seemed kind of like it was soldiers treating soldiers like soldiers, where they were doing their job and we were doing our job, and they were just really curious about America. Asked a lot of questions about America. But anytime somebody with some rank showed up, especially what appeared to be high-ranking officers, they really, really wanted us dead. And there were several more times that we were blindfolded, put down on our knees, guns put to our head, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, again, I thought I was going to die. But eventually they moved us, and at first they took us into Russia for a week, to what seemed to be a kind of semi-permanent POW camp. That's where they really started the interrogation and torture, sleep deprivation, purposeful dehydration. Again, a bunch of war crimes.
I want to speak more about the physical aspect and the torture that you endured in just a moment. Before we get too far, what kind of questions were they asking you about the United States? What about America interested them?
Yeah, the younger soldiers, it was, most of them didn't speak much English, but some spoke a little bit of broken English, and it was things like, Biden, good. Trump, good. And my favorite, a young man goes, American women, good. I was like, I mean, yeah, some of them, I guess, yeah.
That's so interesting. All right.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes it was one of them would light up a cigarette and go, I bet those guys might like a cigarette, and then offer me a puff or two, or a guy take a sip of water and say,
Yeah.
you know what, those guys haven't had any water. I'll give them a sip. A guy forced me to drink vodka with him, which I was very uncomfortable with given the situation I was in. I wanted to have my wits about me, but in that culture, it is a horrible insult to turn down the offer of vodka.
I would imagine.
At-
And at this point, you've been in this situation multiple times of having a bag over your head, being bound, having a gun pressed directly to your head. For those of us who are so fortunate to have not experienced something like that, what goes through your mind in those moments? How do you repeatedly survive something like that mentally intact?
I mean, I think it really depends on the person, but I had the advantage of having those 2 tours in Iraq. I knew I was going into harm's way, and there was a good chance I could die. My second tour, I was lead gunner of an elite convoy security team in Baghdad. And so, I was the only guy with half my body sticking up out of the turret. And I realized there was a very good chance that I could die then. So I had made peace with death back at like the age of 22.
What does that look like, making peace with death?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's different to go, okay, I'm going into a situation where I might die and nothing happening. I had gone into Ukraine realizing, yes, I may fight, and yes, I may die. But it's a totally different situation actually having that gun put to your head and hearing it cocked and it pressed up against your temple. For me, honestly, it was a bit of a peaceful feeling in a way. I just completely let go. And I said in my head, I love you, Diesel. I love you, Mama. And Diesel's my dog, and I said my goodbyes in my head and just waited for them to pull the trigger.
Wow.
I realized that there was nothing I could do in that situation to stop it. If they were going to shoot me, they were going to shoot me.
Yeah. Okay. So take us now. You're in this location and the torture begins, the interrogation begins. Well, what kind of torture are we talking about?
The very first night there, they made me stand up, the entire night. I didn't have a watch, but just based on the sun and everything, I estimated it was something about 14 hours or so, that I was just forced to stay on my feet. I was bound in front of my hands. Randomly guys would just come up and beat me. One very, very large young man came up. I was forced to stay like this the whole time. So he raised up my chin, looked me right in the eye, punched me as hard as he could in the gut, and said, "Welcome to Russia." So that was when I really knew that we were in Russia. But even with that punch, I didn't go down to my knees. I didn't want to give them that satisfaction. If I was going to go down to my knees, you had to force me. They had a shift change of probably around 2-3 in the morning, and those guys came out with batons and just started beating me. If I bent over at all, they would beat me. And that actually worked well. I'd been standing so long and beaten so much that my lower back was starting to spasm. It was incredibly painful. And so I bent over once, and the guy came over and started beating me with a baton on the small of my back to make me get up. And I was like, actually, that's kind of helping with the spasming. I'm going to stay here and just take this beating to get rid of that.
Wow.
I was offered no water during that time. Couldn't sleep during that time. The very first night that they let me go to sleep, they woke me up again around probably 2, 3 in the morning. 2 guards put a bag on my head. I was bound the entire time that I was in Russia that week, whether it was tape or zip ties or handcuffs. I was bound. But they put a bag on my head and led me over to another tent. And for probably about 2 hours, this guy just beat me. Really, really good. He targeted ribs and kidneys really well. He didn't ask a single question. It wasn't an interrogation. He just beat me. So by probably about the 3rd day, because of the severe dehydration and everything, I had actually kind of started hallucinating, which is a terrible thing when you're being interrogated for your life. One of the main problems is that Andy and I had gone out completely stripped. We had no identification, no paperwork, no passports, no phones, nothing that identified us, because we didn't want to be caught with that and possibly lose it. So a lot of what we were having to do was prove who we were, because they swore up and down that we were CIA. They really wanted us to be CIA so they could say the U.S. government was directly involved.
Wow.
Andy and I didn't know each other going into this prior. We met in the Legion, but we actually live about 2 hours away from each other in Alabama. And so to them, it was very, very suspicious that we both had military experience. We were both from Alabama. They decided that the CIA training headquarters, the mecca of the CIA, was in Alabama because we were there. So yeah, it was a lot of that. And I mean, I can't even begin to describe all the instances and situations where I was like, this is it. This is where I'm going to die. It wasn't fun. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. There's so much there. I understand, your ribs were broken with intentionality. Can you tell me more about that?
Right. That was that 2 or 3 a.m. beating. He broke 4 of my ribs. Another situation, a guard was leading me back into the tent that I was in, and it had a wooden floor step up to get in. Now they carry you way bent over with their head wrap or hand wrapped through your arm and push your head down to where you're basically, you can kick yourself in the face with the knees. And so going into the tent, I tripped over that little wooden ledge. And apparently he took offense to that. He thought I did it on purpose or to make him look like a fool or something. So when I got in the tent by my bunk, he lifted my head up and he punched me as hard as he could right in the sternum. And later on while I was at the black site, I had this dirty, filthy, lumpy mattress on the floor that I was sleeping on, and had to be really careful about, I had ribs broken on both sides. So I'd lay as long as I could on this side and then take 7 minutes to roll over to the other side. And I couldn't lay flat on my back. And one night I was rolling over in that long process, and I got on my back and I said, I feel like I can lay here for a minute. And then I felt and heard my sternum separate from his punch and just all the damage that had been done. Yeah, that wasn't fun either.
Oh my gosh. You were hooked up to a car battery at one point. Can you tell me more about that?
Right. After that week in Russia, they moved us to what we call the black site. We know it was somewhere in the Donetsk People's Republic, but we have no idea where. We'll never be able to find this building. That's where the torture got real. It was the same kind of interrogation, same kind of questions, because they never seemed to pass along notes about what they had tried to get from us. But that's where it really got serious. I was in solitary confinement for a month straight. I was given a small loaf of bread once a day. I never knew what time of day it was coming. And often it had mold in it. The only water I had unidentifiable stuff floating in it. And so, yeah, one evening they pulled me out of my cell. They took me down in the basement. I walk in, and our primary translator interrogator that we call Mustache Man, he said, lie down. And I just said, well, on my front or on my back? And he said, well, on your front. So I'm cuffed in the back with metal cuffs. I managed to lay down on my stomach. And the only guy that never wore a balaclava, he didn't care if we saw his face. We called him Dead Eyes. He hooked a metal wire to my cuffs and then put a little clamp with another wire in my ear and just cranked this dial on a huge box. It looked about the size of a car battery. And through the course of that interrogation, again, they were really trying to push that I was CIA.
You were being electrocuted.
I was being electrocuted. Yeah. I mean, my whole body locked up. It was enough that when I got back home, the hairline fractures that it caused just from the way I tensed up, it fractured my entire jaw. I had to go through a massive surgery where I've got a bone graft and a titanium plate. That's how tense the electricity was. And they did it to me 4 times during that session. Yeah.
You know, so something really has struck me so many times through the opportunities I've been honored to speak with you. And that is the repeated description on your part of not wanting to fall to your knees, not wanting to cry out, not wanting to give them that satisfaction. Tell me more about that. Why was that so important to you? And how did you mentally cope and survive this? How did you go through this day after day?
Mostly I managed to survive just because I'm stubborn. That's really it. And I was, if you'll excuse my language, I was pissed at them. You know, I was really mad. I was furious at the treatment I was receiving, that I was being tortured, that they were committing war crimes on me, that they were violating every single human right you can imagine. You know, I was very upset by that, obviously. And, you know, I would let them punch me until they got tired of punching me, or until it just wasn't fun for them anymore, because they weren't getting the reaction they were looking for.
Are you just completely stoic as much as possible through
Oh yeah,
all of this
definitely.
assault?
Yeah, I mean, I never cried out except for the first time they electrocuted me. Yeah, when they finally shut it off, that was the only time I screamed out a profanity. But other than that, I kept it all inside, because I didn't want to give that to them, and I didn't want to let them know what hurt me, because then they know what to target. I mean, they already knew where my broken ribs were, so they were targeting those. I didn't want to give them any other thing to say, oh, this is something he really hates, let's keep doing it to him.
Is there a space in your mind that you would retreat into? How did you go through so many hours of this?
I mean, I think the most challenging part was the solitary confinement. If I wasn't being pulled out to be tortured or go through the kangaroo court death penalty sentence they were giving us, because they claimed we were mercenaries. Other than that, I was just alone in this cell that, it was about 2 feet by 6 feet. It was tile. There was a light on 24/7. There was a camera that was always watching me. My bathroom was just a small bucket. And the boredom was really a problem, because I had nothing to do. And so initially I really tried to keep my mind active. I was replaying my favorite movies in my head. I was replaying video games in my head. I've done construction and woodworking and stuff. So I built houses in my head, like board by board and nail by nail. And I changed the layout, and I thought about, well, is that a, load bearing wall? And I mean, anything I could do to just keep my mind active.
Wow.
Yeah. And that really helped. You know, I was afforded a chance at introspection that very, very few people get. I'm not exactly happy about the way it happened, but it gave me, because I utilized it for this, it gave me this opportunity to really think about, well, who am I? What do I like about myself? What do I not like? What can I change? What can I not change? If I get out of here, or when I get out of here, what do I want to do with my life? And
what insights, what lessons, what conclusions did you walk away with?
I mean, a lot of that's kind of private and personal, but the one that really stands out, I think it was because I wasn't around people, and because I didn't have anything to do besides talk to ants. I decided I wanted to work at a bookstore. I didn't want to be customer facing. I didn't want to work a register. I just wanted to stock shelves. And like, the most interaction I would have would be, well, yes, ma'am, the mystery section's over there. And I go back to stocking shelves, and it was because that was something that was very ordered and structured. And I think there's, of course, I haven't started working at a bookstore. I'm retired from the Army, and so I'm using my retirement to advocate for Ukraine as much as I can. But I think there's probably a lot of insight into what my psyche was going through at that point, and that's why I decided on that.
You say you were having conversations with ants?
Yeah. We were there for a month, and for the first half, they had a loop of about 80 songs that they played all day long, full volume. Unfortunately for them, most of it was music that I listened to in high school. I kind of liked it. It was, a lot of heavy rock and I'm not a big rap fan, but there was some Eminem, and I kind of like some of those. There's a couple Russian songs tossed in, but it was mostly just English heavy rock.
Did they
So
think that that would be mentally disturbing for you?
I think they did. I think they were trying to use it as some kind of psychological torture, and maybe if I wasn't in that kind of music, it might have been. In Desert Storm, we played Panama by Van Halen to just drive some terrorists crazy. They played it for 3 days straight, and then they came out. It would have been better if they just played one song at the black site. It was very annoying. It was very loud, but it was the only way I could keep track of time. I didn't have a window. The light was on 24/7. I figured, your average song is somewhere around 3 minutes long, and I would just count songs to try and see how much time had passed. And about halfway through, they shut the music off, and that was so much worse. I had no way of telling time. I've been a musician and everything. I've got a good sense of rhythm, and so I worked out a system where I timed my steps. I could take about 2.5 steps each way in my cell, and I just walk back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for hours, counting my steps to see about how much time had passed.
Yeah.
But that gets old and you get tired, and so I'd sit down on the floor. They had taken my mattress at that point because I guess one day I looked too comfortable sitting on it. So I was sleeping on a cold tile floor with all these broken ribs, broken sternum, everything. But I would sit on the floor, and because I was only eating this moldy bread, there were a lot of crumbs in there. They didn't come in and clean it up, and ants started coming in, and I made deals with them. I said, hey, don't you guys can hang out, but don't cross this line because you're too close to my bread. And if you're too close to my bread, I will have to kill you. I'm sorry, but I will. During the night, I would always leave a little scrap of bread when I went to bed because, like I said, I didn't know where the bread was coming. It might be bedtime the next day.
Yeah.
So I'd leave a little scrap of bread for breakfast every morning. And a lot of times there were ants in it. And I said, well, at least it's some kind of protein. But, the ones when I was awake, if they crossed that line, I'd say, sorry, man, I got to kill you. And so I'd pick them up and I'd crush them. And I'd crush them really hard, really good, really thoroughly. And, then whenever I dropped that ant corpse, I figure most of the time it was just involuntary nerve spasms and stuff. But if I saw any kind of wiggle in them, I'd pick them up and I'd squish them again just to make sure they were dead, because I didn't want anything to suffer the way that I was suffering. Yeah, I had flies that came into the cell, and I named them based on their characteristics. I would talk to them. The first one was high as hell Harry. His name's Harold, but he goes by Harry.
Oh my goodness.
He just had a really erratic flight pattern. I had Busy Betsy. I had Enrique the Evasive. I could never kill that guy. I realized that in some ways I was starting to lose my mind, but it was the only way to keep my mind active. It was the only kind of social contact I was having besides being beaten.
What was the darkest part of this entire experience for you?
Whew. Each part of the story, I guess, has its own moment like that. When we first got captured, it was having that cocked pistol put against my head. In the black side, it was probably that boredom of being in solitary confinement for so long and starting to lose your mind. After that month, they moved us to kind of a more traditional prison. It was still an isolation prison, but we were in a cell with 3 guys, and so I had people to talk to. But there, it was extreme boredom. We weren't really being beaten anymore, besides when they pulled us out to go to the prosecutor's office. But that meant we weren't being pulled out of the cell at all, except for 1 hour a day. They take your inside cell and put you in an outside cell so you could get a little fresh air and exercise, I suppose. So the boredom really, really set in then. Andy and I made a chess set out of trash that we were really proud of. We had Russian newspaper and like little random bits of cardboard that we just, designed our own pieces, and we would play hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of chess and hours and hours of 20 questions.
So you were able to see Andy at some points throughout this experience.
Yeah, that was after a month and a half, we were reunited in that prison cell, and then we spent, another 2-3 months in there. It was 105 days altogether.
What was it like to see him again?
Oh, it was amazing. I can't tell you how many times throughout this process that I thought Andy was dead, that I thought they'd killed him, and that I'd failed on my mission. I guess the one that stands out the most, two of the interrogators, they were the ones having us make forced phone calls home to try and make contact with the U.S. government. And one of the very first calls, or actually it was the call that kind of ended up saving our lives. It was the one that led to us reaching the State Department. But yeah, I had a spiel that I would say whenever they made me call it, and actually they were getting frustrated because we had tried it. They made Andy call the secretary for the head of business LLC licensing in Alabama. They had me call a state senator's office because they were like, he's senator. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, he is, but. And they go, no, he's senator. You call. And so finally they had found this list online of just like military related things. And one of them was the Veterans Crisis Line, which is it's a suicide hotline.
Oh my
It's for
gosh.
veterans that are in mental distress and need help. So they said, Veterans Crisis Line, you call. And I said, well, man, it's not really that.
It's not that kind of veterans
right.
crisis line.
But he said, you are a veteran and this is a crisis. I said, you know what? You're not wrong, man. Let's try it. Who cares? Let's
How
try.
did it go? How was that call?
Yeah, that was the most interesting because most of the time I'd go through my spiel. I'd say, hello, my name is Alexander Drueke. I'm a United States citizen from Alabama. I was captured on June 9th, north of Kharkiv, while operating with the Ukrainian army, blah, blah, blah. So I went into that spiel, but I changed it for them because after I came back from Iraq the second time, I had some hard times and I'd called them in the past. And so I kind of knew what they were looking for. And so I did my spiel and then I said, listen, I am not drunk. I'm not high. I'm not on anything. I'm not suicidal. Here's what's going on. This is real. And she gave me the number for an agency that I've talked to a lot of people in the federal government. I've been debriefed by almost every alphabet agency you can imagine. Nobody really had heard of this agency before, but she gave me the number and I called that one and did my spiel. And she said, yeah, I'm looking online and I see your name. Can you tell me, were you captured with anyone else? And I knew the spiel by now, so I put the phone on mute and I turned to the interrogators and I said, can I tell them about Andy? And you'll have to excuse my profanity on this one, but they looked at each other with this like bewildered look that to me said, who the fuck is Andy? And I said, oh man, he's already dead. They've already killed him. And there were so many instances like that where I really thought he was dead.
Yeah.
So there was twice going to the prosecutor's office from the black site that we were taken together in the right truck. And I knew he was alive then, but yeah, when we finally got together at the prison and we didn't have bags on our heads and we weren't bound and we didn't have to whisper because the guards were right there or we thought they were right there. I was able to hug my buddy and see his face, and I mean that was absolutely amazing. Yeah. But over time, it was just we spent so much time in that cell doing nothing that we felt like our brains were turning into mush, and really the depression was really starting to set in because we realized we were on Russian death row with not a fair trial. With my lawyer only said two things to me. She said, we are going to kill you. We are going to give you the death penalty, and das vidanya, which is goodbye.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's the representation one dreams of.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's horrifying. So you were sentenced to death in a Russian kangaroo court.
We were going through the process. We never actually got sentenced, but yeah, we were going through that process.
Okay. At any point, did you just give the interrogators what they wanted? Did you just confess to whatever they were asking for? Yes, I'm CIA. Yes, I'm whatever you say.
Oh God, no. I definitely, I told them plenty of lies, but I didn't want to give them a lie that they wanted. In the military, we're taught if you are a POW, just resist. Don't give them anything. Don't say anything. Don't do. And Andy and I found out pretty quick that doesn't really work. You have to give them something. And so,
what kind of lies would you tell them? What kind of information would you give them?
Well, it was a lot of things like if they asked me 3 questions, back to back, I would take so long answering the most minor one that they would kind of forget they had asked the other 2. Or I'd give them tiny little bits of information that didn't really matter, but at least I was giving them something. And so they were like, well, we got something from him. I lied, like I came into it saying, oh no, I was just here for humanitarian work. When they had caught me with body armor and, a rifle and everything.
Yeah.
I was like, no, humanitaka, humanitarian work. They didn't believe that one, obviously. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was more, it wasn't so much lying. It was evading their questioning. And no, I never said, yes, I'm CIA, or yes, the U.S. government's involved, nothing like that.
Right. It would have been
Rec-
an international incident if
exactly.
you had
Exactly.
confirmed that. What is it like to be forced by the Russians to make a propaganda video?
I mean, it was really tough. You know, I didn't want to say the things that they were making me say, but I was getting beaten in between interviews for what I said or didn't say. The guys that were beating me were right there in the room while the interviews were being done. So again, I tried to avoid as much of it as I could, but I realized that, yeah, some of these things I just can't get around. Some of them I have to say.
Yeah. What are you thinking about Bunny, about your mom at home this whole time? Were you able to
Um,
communicate with her at all?
Eventually, yeah, because of those forced phone calls, once we ended up making contact with the State Department and the guy who had been assigned to our case and our case alone, and had already been in contact with our families daily since about 7 or 10 days after we were captured, made contact with him, and then I guess probably while at the black site, it was probably about every 3 evenings or so, they'd pull me up to call him and just try and force propaganda through me. But really, they wanted to get rid of us, but they didn't know how, and they didn't know what they wanted to get in return.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it was trying to determine that.
Mm.
But after those calls, my reward was to call my mother. But again, the guys beating me are in the room, and it's on speakerphone. And so, I mean, we weren't free to talk freely. It was great to hear her voice, but it was exhausting to have those phone conversations.
Yeah, I can't imagine the roller coaster of emotions. Um, and in some ways, I can imagine it even being harder to be sort of emotionally cracked open like that by hearing her voice. It must have been
Yeah.
really difficult. Um, what were you able to communicate with her, and what were you not able to say? What did you just want to scream into that phone and have her hear?
I wanted to scream, I'm being tortured, I'm being beaten, I'm being starved, I'm being dehydrated. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they are slowly killing me. That's what I really wanted to say. But all I could actually say was, "How's my dog?"
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to talk about other family members. We didn't want to let them know any of their names or what the situation was, because we didn't want them to be able to target them as well.
Mm. And I'm assuming that you loved her. I'm assuming you were able to tell her that as well.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the phone call, we could always say something like that, and I'll admit, I think when we first made contact with the State Department, and the first time I talked to my mother, I got a little choked up, but I didn't want them to see me cry. So I mean,
Yeah.
I never cried during the whole experience. There was once at the black site and once in the isolation prison that I said, "Hey, there's nothing going on, and this is a terrible situation. I think normal people would cry about this. I should probably cry," and I tried, but I couldn't, because I think my mind was just going, that doesn't solve anything. It doesn't fix anything. It's just a waste of your time and a waste of your liquids. You're not getting enough liquids, so don't waste it with tears. So yeah, I couldn't cry about it.
I don't even know what question to ask about the level of mental fortitude that you had during this experience. Have you always been this way, sort of a master of your own mind and emotions, just very able to compartmentalize and get through hardship? I understand it's part of the training, but I mean this is beyond uh beyond anything I've heard.
Right. Beyond anything I was trained for. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always appreciated stoicism, and I've tried to not necessarily live my life by it, but include it in my life. And yeah, of course, doing 12 years in the army and 2 tours in Iraq, that kind of helped. But really, throughout this whole experience, I was living not day by day. I was living second
Hmm.
by second and
Yeah.
encounter by encounter. And you know, I I would hope for certain things. And I would hope things would work out a certain way, but there was no way for me to plan anything. I never knew what was coming, and so I really think having being required to have that level of concentration and focus, um, that's what really got me into that headspace where I could just be completely stoic about
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. At this point, are you hopeful that you are going to be released sometime soon, or are you truly just waiting for a likely execution at the hands of Russia?
Folks, we were ever hopeful. When we got put together in the prison, we would talk about if we get out of here, and we tried to remind ourselves to say no when we get out of here. I mean, that was really difficult. I mean, we were always hopeful. We would talk about like ways that it might happen and everything, but we would also talk about, well, what's your limit? When are you going to commit suicide in this cell because you can't take it anymore? What's going to be your final words that you scream out when the firing squad's about to shoot you in the face? It was a real, like you said, it was a real roller coaster.
Were there the means to be able to take one's own life?
Not really.
Is it something you thought about a lot?
Yeah, I mean, we had discussions on it, and we had all kind of set some kind of, at least a date to say, at that point, I'll reevaluate and see if it's time to kill myself or not. Really the only options, but we were in bunk beds. There were 3 bunk beds, but there was only 3 of us in the cell. And so there was an empty bunk above me, with like a wire mesh to make the base for the mattress. And they had replaced some of the broken springs with nails. And I'd found one that still had the point on it. And so this little hole in the wall that I stuck this tiny little nail in to say I might be able to use it to stab a guard if I can and need to, or I might be able to stab myself with it. That's not going to be a good death, but it's a death.
Wow.
Or possibly I might have been able to use my, if you want to call it a sheet, my bedding. I thought I could possibly tie that to the bunk above me and do a suspension hanging if it came to it.
I
I was
appreciate
going to
you
give it
sharing
a
those
year and then
details.
reevaluate. But one of the guys said, I'm not going to ring in the new year here. I'll kill myself before we start a new year.
And did you give any thought? I know you mentioned what would be the final words that you would yell out before a firing squad. Did you decide on those words?
Oh yeah, mine was going to be Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine, because I knew that would piss them off right before they shot me.
Wow.
I told you we'd play tons of 20 questions, and it's animal, mineral, or vegetable and everything, and so we'd guess, and if it was mineral, we'd say, well, is it metal? Yes. Is it a bullet? Yes. Is it the bullet that's going to shoot you in the face? Yes. So one of our guys, one of the British guys, he decided his last words were going to be mineral to imply the bullet from that game. Yeah.
Okay. And I know the man who was in your cell along with you who was talking about when his end date would possibly be. Do you know what ended up happening to him?
Yeah, there were 9 English speakers there, and we all ended up getting released in late September. So he's back home in Britain, and I mean, we're like 2 something years after our release date, and all of the POWs are still having large amounts of health issues that we can directly tie it to everything that was going on. So I mean, he's a lot older, and so he's struggling more than some of us, but he's home and he's getting medical
I'm
care.
sure. Tell me about finally finding out that you were going to be released.
Yeah, we didn't know, and I guess really, you said what was the worst moment, the darkest moment of this entire experience? It was being released. That was the only time that many of us actually asked for death, or those that pray, they prayed for death. Like,
That is so interesting. Tell me more about that.
we about the time we were normally taken out for the walk, we thought we were just going to our outside cell that day. But they pulled us out, and it said they put us in one large holding cell with all the English speakers, which was amazing because I mean, we've been able to shout over the walls during the walk to these guys, and discuss all kinds of different things during that 1 hour a day, and the rest of the time we couldn't see them and talk to them. So to be able to shake their hands and give them hugs and go like, man, I have a fairly deep voice, but I'm a fairly small man. So a lot of them were like, I swore you were going to be bigger. So, it was stuff like that. It was really cool. But they just kept us in there for hours. And we were like, what's going on? This is really suspicious. Are we getting released? Are we moving prisons? Is this for a mass execution? And we didn't know. So we started asking the guards and the trustees for some cigarettes, and they just started passing them out like candy. And we said, oh, no, this is not good. They're being too generous. They are going to kill us. So we waited hours in there, and then finally they took us out one by one, plastic bags on our heads, and the prison personnel turned us over to Russian military personnel and they put us in the back of a military truck, stacked on top of each other in this position that you can't describe it. I'd have to show you. But it was a position where we were all on top of each other. We couldn't breathe. We all have injuries, and so broken ribs and broken feet and everything are being stepped on and squished, and it was about 24 hours that they just drove us around in this truck. They stopped at another prison, and we could hear them taping up other prisoners. They'd used packing tape, which, duct tape and some other things, they got a little bit of give to them. Packing tape does not. And so they bound our hands with packing tape, and then the plastic bags on our heads, they tightly wrapped the packing tape around our eyes on top of that bag. It was incredible.
How could you even breathe?
We couldn't,
Yeah.
It was
It doesn't sound like they cared at all what kind of condition you all arrived in. I mean,
no, yeah, we kind of noticed a trend whenever we were moving locations. It was almost like, when you go to a new location, they jump you in. They just beat the hell out of you to say, hey, while you're here, you're going to be beaten, I guess. But then whenever they had to give us up for the next phase, they would also beat us again, mercilessly. And I think it was, it was just a way of like, well, this is our last chance to beat you, so we're gonna do whatever we can to you.
and what is the moment throughout this whole experience where you mentioned wishing for death?
It was during that 24 hours of just the truck did a route. I could feel the motion of the truck and realized we were making the same turns over and over and over, and the guards would stop and they'd get out and use the bathroom and have a cigarette, but they wouldn't let us. We asked if we could use the bathroom, and they thought about it, and some of our guys spoke Russian as well, so they were able to translate, and the guard finally said, you can piss where you sit. And so we're like, well, we don't want to pee on ourselves or each other because we're crammed together. So, I mean, we all held it in. But yeah, we just drove and drove and drove until they finally took us to what appeared to be a small international airport in Russia. And, I won't go into all the details, but we were checked out by Saudi Arabian medical personnel, which was really weird. I said, do you need to know if I have high blood pressure before you shoot me in the face?
At that point, you still thought you were on your way to execution.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, we all did. Yeah. They took us out on the tarmac and put us on. There was this huge Saudi airplane out there. I was like, that's not for us. They're not going to put us on that. And then they put us on that.
Is that the moment that it dawned on you, I might actually be getting out of here?
Nope, not yet. Not yet.
Wow.
Because we all thought, oh, either there's a bomb already on the plane, or they're going to shoot a missile at us and take down this plane and say, hey, we were releasing these guys, but there was a mechanical failure and the plane blew up and crashed. Yeah, we thought that was the easiest way to get rid of us at that point.
Wow.
It wasn't until the Saudi Arabian personnel on the plane came out and said, listen, this is for real. You guys are getting released. We're going to take you to Riyadh. We're going to put you in contact with your embassies and consulates and everything. You are getting freed. And
what is that moment like? What is the reaction in the plane?
most of us just stared at each other with wide eyes and open mouths. But we were also going, is he lying? Is this for real? It seems like something, I don't know why Saudi Arabia is involved, but it seems like something the Russians would do is lie to us like this. But yeah, then they had duffel bags for us with clean clothes and toiletries, because we were wearing clothes that homeless people would turn down, and we hadn't been able to do any personal hygiene. It was bad. So it was nice to clean up, and they give us food and they give us cigarettes. It's the only time in my life I've been able to smoke on a plane. It was pretty cool. We talked until we got to Riyadh. It wasn't until we got off the plane in Riyadh, and we walked into the airport, and our embassy representative, our ambassador to Saudi Arabia, was there and introduced herself and said, you guys are free. Do you want to call your families?
What is that moment like?
Oh. Well, I said, of course I do. Yeah. So she said, do you know your family's number? I said, yeah. She called, she introduced herself and handed me the phone. And I said, hi, Mama. She goes, what are you doing in Saudi Arabia? I said, well, I'm free. She said, you're what? I'm free. She said, free? it was like the word didn't even make sense to her. And so, I kept it together. I said, hey, listen, here's what's going on. They're going to take care of us. They're getting us medically checked out. We'll be in touch soon, but I want to let Andy call his fiance.
Yeah.
Do you have her number? Because he's so young, he doesn't memorize phone numbers.
Right.
He didn't know her number. And she's like, yes, I
Wow.
have her number. So we got it, and he was able to call her. They took me away right after that because the tape around my eyes had been so tight. I had a horrible reaction, and my entire face had swelled up.
Oh.
And by the time we got to Riyadh, it had drained to where I was blind. I couldn't open my eyes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I was a little worried I was going to lose my eyesight. So yeah, they took us in, and we all got checked. We all had issues, and we all got checked out. I had to stay overnight to make sure that I wasn't going to lose my eyes.
I can't imagine how frightening. And I can't help but notice as well through this whole conversation, this is, you know, an emotional moment. What is the emotion that is still there for you in that moment when you are free and they ask, do you want to call your loved ones, and you get on the phone with your mom?
I mean, I think you could tell through this whole time we've been talking for almost an hour. I've been able to talk about torture. I've been able to talk about, my feelings during that situation. It's not until I say the word free that I start to choke up.
Yeah. What's in that word for you?
Man, everything. It's why I've started doing what I've been doing since I got home. I made the choice in captivity that if I got out of it, I was going to do good things with my life. I was going to turn this into a positive experience as best I could, instead of just wallowing in it and letting it eat me,
I imagine that the road home was not simple. What was it like to come back stateside, to be in your own bed again? I imagine it was high highs and some really weird lows as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, seeing everybody was great. And sometimes it felt like I've been gone 3 years or 3 months or 3 days. And in a lot of ways, life just goes back to normal. But that was very weird to be back in just a normal everyday setting was disconcerting in a lot of ways. And I didn't know what to do. There were tons of highs and happy moments and everything, but there were a lot of lows. I spent most of my time when I got back home, I'd just sit on the back porch and just listen to music and think about what had happened, try and process this experience.
Yeah.
And I still do that. It's we all have pretty severe PTSD from this, and some of that's never going to go away. But when Andy and I talk about it, most of the time we end up just telling all the funny stories, because surprisingly, there's so many hilarious stories from this experience. It's just so much of it was so ridiculous. And, you don't want to lose those happy memories, but that means you can't get rid of the bad memories too.
Yeah. And beyond the PTSD, you also have lifelong other health effects. What are some of those?
Right. I mean, luckily my by the time I got back, my ribs had healed well enough. I had x-rays and they said, yeah, we can see they were broken, but they're doing okay. I had the jaw surgery. I still have permanent nerve damage in my hands from all the bindings. I have early onset arthritis in my hands and knees. I have a heart condition from the electricity. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of issues, and it's the same with the other guys too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you've continued to come on my show and to speak out because the fight is not over. And I understand that there's a part of your heart that is still in Ukraine. What has it been like, especially recently, when, Alex, there are so many Americans who are done with all of this? They see the billions of dollars in aid that we've sent over. They look around our own country and say that needs to be here. We've done too much. It is sad what they're going through, but, we need to wrap this up, and we need to not necessarily send any more money over, any more aid over. What is going through your mind? What do you wish every American understood about Ukrainians, about your experience over there, and what continues to happen? What is at stake today?
Yeah, that's a big topic, and it's something that I'm constantly thinking about, especially over the past, definitely for the past 2 years, but especially over the past few weeks. People are seeming to forget Russia and the dictator Putin invaded Ukraine illegally without reason. They broke sovereignty. They violated international law. They're murderers and rapists and war criminals and torturers. If you don't believe it, come talk to me. All the things we've talked about today, they are real. These things actually happened to me. They are war criminals, and they are the invaders. People want peace. Trust me, the Ukrainians want peace. I want peace. Everyone wants peace in the world. Not even just about Ukraine. Everyone wants peace, but it has to be the right peace. You can't just give up everything that Russia wants. Putin is the dictator. Putin is the invader. Zelensky was democratically elected, and he doesn't want to be president anymore. But they can't hold elections during martial law, especially because they can't hold any voting right now. There are too many Ukrainians not in the country or fighting on the front lines, and the ones that are in the country, if they group at polling places, we know for a fact, without question, without a doubt, Russia will target them. They will kill as many civilians as they possibly can, because they've already been doing that for the past 2 years, 3 years.
What concerns you when it comes to Putin's ambitions and also Putin's track record in terms of keeping his promises?
Yeah. Well, since 2014, the first invasion of Ukraine by Russia into Donbass and Crimea, they have made 25 peace agreements between Ukraine and Russia, both agreed upon peace agreements, and Russia and Putin has broken every single one of them. He cannot be trusted. He's a former KGB agent during the Soviet Union. He was stationed in East Germany. He wants a return to the Soviet Union. He wants all of the territory that they used to have. And back then, the Soviet Union was trying to gain more territory. So, of course, even if he gets everything they used to have, he wants to keep expanding. He wants his legacy to be, I expanded the Russian Federation, regardless of what that takes. If it takes war crimes, if it takes lying, if it takes breaking ceasefires, he'll do it to get what he wants, without question.
And Alex, these days, when you said you are sitting on the porch and you're listening to music and you're just trying to make sense of all of this, what sense have you made of this? What thoughts do you have about this period of time in your life today?
Obviously I have some thoughts about Russians that I won't mention on this interview, but, I learned a lot about myself. I really did. And because I've tried to make something positive of it, I think I've gained a lot more confidence in myself. I used to be an introvert. The Army was the only thing that made me kind of come out of my shell. But as you said, I whenever I'm presented with the opportunity to have an interview and spread my message about Ukraine, I take it. I've had countless meetings with senators and congresspeople and their staffers. And these are situations. I never wanted to be famous. I never wanted to be, going to all these offices on Capitol Hill. I never wanted that, but I realized that my story, my experience has so much behind it that it does carry weight. Mm-hmm. And I need to use that experience for good. Yeah. I would have done this for Ukraine is my second home now. I've been adopted by the Ukrainians. I wear Vyshyvanka on a regular basis. I love Ukraine. It's my second home. But I would have done this for any country that I'd gone and fought for if they were in a similar situation of just right versus wrong, good versus evil.
Alex, any bookstores in your future?
No, definitely no bookstores. I'm happy being retired because it gives me the flexibility to, do this spontaneous meeting with you. And even this week, I received kind of a last minute email to be like, hey, I have a meeting scheduled with Senator Tuberville. Would you like to tag along? I said, of course I would. So it's nice having that open schedule. So no bookstore work, but there is a British reporter who was actually a hostage of Somali pirates at one point. He is writing a collection of stories on the Ukraine war, and I'm featured in 2 chapters of that. So I don't think I'll be writing my own book anytime soon, but I'm going to be in a book.
I mean, Alex, there's more than a book in you. I can tell you that much. And we just skimmed the surface today, but it's been a real honor. Thank you so much for sharing so much, for your candor today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I always appreciate how you give me the time to get my message out, and you ask the right questions. You don't tailor it to what you want. You let me speak and you let me get my message out. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for that.
Oh, thank you for saying that. And please say hi to Bunny for me, as always.
I definitely will. She's out of town
her.
right now, but yeah, I'll let her know.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.